By the way, the Crown is so vindictive that they're seeking to seize Chris Barber's big semi-trailer truck, which is how he and his family earn their living. Imagine being so punitive and vicious and petty that in addition to sending him to prison for 8 years, they want to steal his truck so he can't earn a living. Absolutely disgraceful. The sentencing ruling will be issued in October. I mean, who's in any hurry, right?
Do we have a specific date, or did the judge just say October? I thought it was October 7th or 8th. I'm sorry, I'm going off the top of my head. And I can tell you right now that I can't speak for Chris Barber. I can't speak for anyone, but I am aware that Tamara Lich intends to appeal. So this will continue well into 2026. It's a show trial. It could be ended in 1 second if Doug Ford wanted it to be. Well, as you know, for the last 2 days, I have been in Ottawa. I'm back in Toronto now. I was in Ottawa for the sentencing hearing of two of the, what I call spiritual leaders of the trucker convoy back in February of 2022. Chris Barber and I think the woman who was like the Joan of Arc of the whole movement, Tamara Lich. It was a sentencing hearing. Both had been convicted, which sort of surprised me because the trial was so weak on actual evidence they did anything wrong. It really felt like the convoy itself was being put on trial rather than two individual people. Yesterday and the day before were sentencing hearings, and the judge, sounds like, will reserve her ruling and announce the sentence in October. I mean, what's the rush? It's already been 3.5 years. Joining me now to talk about this is our friend John Carpe, who's the boss of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms that has been crowdfunding Chris Barber's legal fees, while the Democracy Fund has crowdfunded Tamara Lich. Hey, John, great to see you again. Good to be with you, Ezra.
Now, were you following things? I mean, there was a lot of people in court tweeting and a lot of news reports. Did you follow what went on a little bit yesterday, at least through the media?
I had read the Crown's sentencing submissions calling for the 7 years, 8 years, which kind of read like a CBC screed, about these just that as though the Freedom Convoy people were dangerous criminals and violent neo-Nazis, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't use that language, but it was almost a hysterical tone in that brief. I was not able to follow the proceedings in court, but I did review the Crown submissions that Chris Barber should get 8 years in jail and Tamara Lich 7 years in jail over their participation in a peaceful protest.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. I mean, those are so astonishingly removed from precedent. That's the whole thing about the law, is the reason we need to follow precedent is twofold. First of all, so that law is meted out even-handedly. So everyone knows what you get if you commit crime X with facts Y. As long as the facts are the same, the punishment should be the same. That's one reason for precedent. The other is so we can govern our behavior going forward. And it is just a fact, John, and I've been in so many of these sentencing hearings, including for the Coots truckers who were charged. A lot of the law in Canada was set, the precedents were set with left-wing protests for Greenpeace and other left-wing groups, anti-forestry, anti-oil, and frankly, a lot of left-wing Antifa rioters at the G20 15 years ago. And here's what I've learned from attending all these trials and hearing about all these cases. If it is your first time being charged with mischief for a protest, even if you blocked a road or shut down some, operations, if you were not violent, if you didn't do something just insane, you don't get any jail time. In fact, quite often you get a discharge, you don't even get a criminal record. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm just saying that's the precedent. There's dozens of cases like that. So for the Crown prosecutors to say, out of the blue, no, we want 7 and 8 years prison for two people, law-abiding people, never had a criminal record, did not engage in violence. In fact, the opposite, were trying to talk people down. If they saw violence, in fact, they reported it to police, worked with police daily. What do you call that? You call that lawlessness? You call that a vendetta, vengeance? You call that a political show trial? I think they disgraced themselves and the government by putting forward such an extreme demands. I can't even tell you how far away that is from normal. I mean, Pat King was another trucker. They wanted, I think, 7 or 10 years or something in prison. He got 0, and he was convicted of 5 charges. I think that Doug Ford's prosecutors, and they're his, they're not prosecutors who answer to Mark Carney or Justin Trudeau. They are a disgrace to the whole province. And I don't know who is instructing them, but they are so outside the norm that it's got to be a scheme or a strategy cooked up by someone, because I don't believe that even the most left-wing prosecutor would so, I don't even know what to say. It's not a legal, it's a punishment they're seeking, it's a political punishment. I think they have to be instructed to do something so dumb.
Well, I'd back it up a little bit further, and why were they prosecuted in the first place? In Manitoba, the most glaring, there's a double standard in Canada where the police are looking not at your behavior, but they're looking at the cause that you're advocating for or against, right? And that's just completely wrong. It shouldn't matter legally whether you're protesting for Israel, against Israel, for against lockdowns, for this, against that. It shouldn't matter whether you're waving the Canadian flag, the Hamas flag, the rainbow flag. It doesn't matter what flag you're waving. It doesn't matter what you're protesting for. It should be only your behavior that gets taken into account. But we saw this double standard already during lockdowns when the people protesting against lockdowns, peaceful outdoor protests, and getting tickets left, right, and center, and all over Canada, people got tickets for peacefully protesting outdoors when those outdoor protests were in violation of provincial health orders. And yet, when there was anti-racism protests in May and June of 2020, no tickets were issued, even though those were in violation of the provincial health orders. In Regina, the chief of police actually spoke at an illegal rally, illegal contrary to the health orders. Chief of police publicly speaking at a rally, but it's an anti-racism rally, so that's okay, right? And the worst example, you'll remember this, July of 2021, when some Aboriginal protesters protesting against residential schools tore down and vandalized a statue of Queen Victoria, which is blatantly criminal conduct. Legally, you're allowed to destroy your own property, but not somebody else's property. So they're destroying public property in broad daylight. Police just stand by and watch. And a few months later, the Manitoba Crown prosecutor says, we're not going to lay charges against any of these people at all. Yeah. So this double standard, it's toxic, it's corrosive, it's cancerous. And I hope that when the judge issues a verdict, it will be something to move away from the double standard and not to reinforce it.
Yeah, I keep thinking that phrase, bring the administration of justice into disrepute.
Into disrepute.
I mean,
yeah.
Of course, Justin Trudeau himself went out to take a knee with George Floyd in the middle of the COVID lockdowns. There was something there that you probably would have missed if you weren't in the courthouse. And as you know, John, when there's a criminal conviction and they're talking about sentence, both sides can bring in, I guess what I would call is soft evidence, letters of reference, letters from family. On the side of the accused, they're a good family person. This is the first time they've got in trouble with the law. Here's how they serve their community. Like, it's basically their friends and family saying, hey, he's a good guy. And obviously, those are not objective statements. As the judge said yesterday, she's never read a letter from a mother that is not supportive of a son. But, having that shows that you at least have a family that cares about you. On the other side, victims are allowed something called a victim impact statement. So if you've been robbed, if you've been punched in the face, and now you are injured or you have some sort of trauma, you're allowed to make a statement too. So there is that soft evidence on both sides. And here's what's so crazy, John. I don't know if you saw my tweets about this, and I later asked Lawrence Greenspan, the lawyer, about this, and it was raised in court several times. Doug Ford's prosecutors submitted a bunch of letters as victim impact statements dealing with what? Well, the case, which is who? Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. Except for, John, they were not written by any victims of Tamara Lich or Chris Barber. They were documents taken from other lawsuits. One was a victim impact statement about when Pat King was on trial. Some were affidavits drafted by a private sector lawyer called Paul Champ, who's a class action sort of ambulance chaser who's suing the truckers for $300 million. He drafted some affidavit for that purpose, and somehow all of these so-called victim impact statements, which were not written to talk about what Tamara Lich had done and what Chris Barber had done, the prosecutor gave it to the court as if they were victim impact statements written by Paul Champ, who's this, solicitor of fortune trying to make millions off the truckers. So he's got a conflict of interest. How the heck did some ambulance chaser, I'm calling him that because he really, there's no other way to describe it. I mean, let me just be nice. He's a class
former
action
director
lawyer
on the board of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, by the way.
But how on earth does he draft a fake, it would be like applying for a job and using a gorgeous reference letter that wasn't written about you. You're sending this gorgeous letter to the employer and this is a wonderful, but it's not about you. So the prosecutor put all these letters demonizing, and I suffered this trauma and I suffered that trauma, but it wasn't about Chris Barber or Tamara Lich. It wasn't even written. It was crafted by some private sector lawyer trying to get rich. How? How is that ethical? How is that lawful? What else did the Crown do in partnership with this lawyer of fortune? I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before. And the judge pushed back on it. But that lawyer, Siobhan Wetcher is her name, she didn't budge. She said, "Oh, Your Honor, you have to look at these." Rah, 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 rah. I was shocked that she was found out to be a bit of a fraud, and she held her ground. She didn't have a big asterisk saying these aren't actually about Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. Have you ever heard of anything like that before?
Nothing quite like this. In the 105-page judgment, which I did read last week, the whole premise of the guilty verdict is these. It's not the direct action of Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, but they were found guilty of mischief because they were part of this mass mischief or collective mischief. And so the legal theory is that the some residents in downtown Ottawa were obstructed and inconvenienced, and Section 430 mischief includes interfering with the lawful use and enjoyment of property. So the thesis of the verdict, which might be appealed, right? Because if it's going to be appealed, it's only after sentence is imposed. They could appeal the sentence, or they could appeal the guilty verdict, or both. But the premise is that there is this mass mischief. So even if Chris Barber himself parked his truck on Wellington, which didn't obstruct any residents, didn't prevent people from entering and leaving their apartment buildings, and even if Tamara Lich didn't have her own vehicle with her in Ottawa, they're part of the group that obstructed Ottawa downtown residents, and so my question would be, and maybe you were able to observe this, but were these signed a second time by people, or was it just an affidavit that was put before the court? And did the people consent to having that same evidence?
We don't even know that
time?
yet. No one knows how they arrived. Some of them didn't have names on them. It's junk law by lawyers not acting as lawyers. They're acting as some sort of vengeful agents of I don't even know who. It was super gross. And to answer your question, yes, this will be appealed. Now the verdict, it won't come out till October, the slowest mischief trial in Canadian history. I got to tell you, John, I like being deferential to judges. Obviously, they're smarter than me and they're more learned in the law than me. But after a while, I just started noticing how much this judge interrupts and shares every thought that crosses her mind. And I think she probably interrupts on average every 90 seconds. It's like she's showing that she has thoughts about every single sentence. Like, it was so disruptive. And I thought to myself two things. First of all, no wonder This is now 50 days long, this trial, 50 hearing days. And the second thing, and she would tell jokes, and the whole gallery would go, and you could tell she loved it. And John, I got to tell you, this is Justice Heather Perkins McVeigh. You can tell she loves this case so much she doesn't want it to end. She's going to be lonely in court, like she's in the biggest courtroom in Ottawa right now. There's so many people there. There's so many media. There's so many security guards necessary. So many colorful characters. She tells jokes. Everyone laughs. There's so many lawyers there. 3 lawyers for Tamara Lich, 1 or 2 for Chris Barber, 4 for the prosecution. Like, it's an enormous show, and she's the ringmaster. John, she's going to have postpartum depression once this is over. She's relishing every moment of it, and it reminds me of Judge Lance Ito in the case of
O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, of O.J. Simpson, who was chosen because he was neither black nor white. I think it was sort of obvious, but he just got consumed with the celebrity. And this judge, I think, is a political, journalistic, celebrity-oriented judge, and I think the way she's run this trial has been atrocious. And I think she's very much a creature of peer pressure. I don't know what she's going to do. It's so crystal clear to me that the only possible sentence is no custodial time. But who knows? I mean, this judge wants to be cool and famous and be invited to all the right parties in Ottawa. I think it's gross, and I sort of wish I didn't visit the trial so many times because I'm sort of disgusted by what I saw. Last word to you, John.
You know, I don't care too much about her style as long as she rules fairly and justly, and certainly in references to light sentences given out to other protesters, right? If they have not been violence, property damages, threatening behavior, et cetera, et cetera. If the precedent has been that protesters without a criminal record, behaving peacefully on a first-time conviction, if they are not serving jail time, then neither should Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, and they're both to be commended for their leadership in what was an incredibly important peaceful protest that really did a lot of good for the country. I think it hastened, it sped. Lockdowns and vaccine passports would have ended, for the most part anyways, but that whole peaceful protest sped things up.
It broke the fever.
Enormously.
People woke up like from a trance, absolutely. By the way, the Crown is so vindictive that they're seeking to seize Chris Barber's big semi-trailer truck, which is how he and his family earn their living. Imagine being so punitive and vicious and petty that in addition to sending him to prison for 8 years, they want to steal his truck so he can't earn a living. Absolutely disgraceful. The sentencing ruling will be issued in October. I mean, who's in any hurry, right?
Do we have a specific date, or did the judge just say October?
I thought it was October 7th or 8th. I'm sorry, I'm going off the top of my head. And I can tell you right now that I can't speak for Chris Barber, I can't speak for anyone, but I am aware that Tamara Lich intends to appeal. So this will continue well into 2026. It's a show trial. It could be ended in 1 second if Doug Ford wanted it to be, but no, he remembered that Doug Ford was as abusive as Justin Trudeau. He declared an emergency in his own right. He once said, "You're not allowed out of your house for any reason whatsoever." Police immediately said, "Yeah, we're not enforcing that, boss." He's a disgrace in his own way. I'm glad we're fighting this. The JCCF on Chris Barber's side, the Democracy Fund on Tamara Lich's side. If we didn't do it, I'll tell you one thing: Paul Champ's Civil Liberties Union wouldn't.
Absolutely.
Well, John, great to see you. Keep up the good work of the JCCF. What's the website? jccf.ca?
That's correct. Justice Center Constitutional Freedoms, jccf.ca.
Perfect. Keep in touch. Keep up the fight.
Take care.
All right, there he is, John Carpe. Well, I tell you, it was quite a visit, and it's not over yet. Hi, Hi, everybody. I was just talking to Tamara Lich. As you know, tomorrow she's back in court in Ottawa facing sentencing for her role in the trucker convoys. You know, Rebel News has supported her all the way. We published her book. We've helped crowdfund. I talked to her about her security. Remember, she's been paying her security herself. We've covered the bill so far. And I said, Tamara, do you have security? Because there are so many crazies outside that Ottawa courthouse. She has needed it before. She said she was having some trouble finding security. Rebel News, as you know, has connections with security because we always need it for our reporters. So we've lined up security for her. And I've also offered to pay her travel costs. Remember, she's coming back and forth from Alberta at her own expense, hotel, gas, etc. I said, there's no way you should bear that burden. Let me try to crowdfund that. We'll take care of the security, and we'll take care of your hotel and your travel. If you want to help me protect Tamara Lich as she comes and goes in Ottawa, and I know that sounds sort of extreme, but the kooks who are around the courthouse there are, actually one of them was just convicted, Deanna Sharif. Help me protect Tamara. Go to protecttamara.com. We have already arranged her security, so she'll be good. I just need your help to pay the bill. Go to protecttamara.com.